The NFL draft is less than 48 hours away. What are the best and worst case scenarios for the New York Giants? We're breaking all that down for you coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network, part of SI.com. And a special welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the little bell. There's going to be plenty of content coming up over the next several days because it's draft time. And here to help me break down some of the Giants' best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, and just talk about the draft in general because it's almost here, folks, is Brandon Olsen. Brandon is not only one of our college hosts over on the Locked On Network, he is also a writer for Giants Country. He's been doing some great draft work over there, previewing prospects. He's got a big board out. He's got all kinds of cool stuff out, plus more stuff coming. So Brandon, welcome on in to the Locked On Giants podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited. Draft week's finally here.
I know we're finally going to get some answers. Long time waiting for some answers. And Brandon, let's talk about some of the best case scenarios for this Giants draft. Now, we have heard all kinds of rumors. We've heard the Giants might trade up. They might stay put. They might trade down. They might do this. I mean, basically everything in between. In your mind, Brandon, what is the best case scenario for the Giants in round one where they can get the best value, the best potential player? Just lay out, if you will, the entire scenario, which would be the best case scenario.
I think ideally you end up in a world where some quarterbacks go early, but also fourth and fifth, where you have the Cardinals and the Chargers, that maybe the Cardinals go receiver, Chargers go receiver. Something happens where a quarterback falls to you because I feel like it's not a big secret the Giants would like a quarterback. And so if you can get one without needing to trade up, then that'd be an ideal world. Maybe the Vikings and Cardinals can't come to a term and agreement on the trade. Hopefully Jim Harbaugh just wants to be Jim Harbaugh and go with an offensive lineman early on there or a receiver. But in an ideal world, you have one of the top 4 quarterbacks available at 6, and you get to take from there. And hopefully it's one that the New York Giants are relatively high on.
But do you think, though, given the way the draft is stacked, I mean, could the Giants still come away with a valuable piece at quarterback if they were to maybe go wide receiver? Or do you think it makes more sense to go receiver later in the draft, given the depth of it, and take care of the quarterback first?
I think you could definitely still find a quarterback that can contribute at some point. It's just a matter of when you take that little risk of, there will be one there later. There's a decent chance that there's not. And look, a guy not getting drafted in the first round isn't getting drafted in the first round for a reason. And it's not to say that he can't work out. We've seen plenty of guys work out, like the Russell Wilsons and the Tom Brady's, of course, but those are more outliers and exceptions, not the rule. And so, but also with receiver, you can double dip at receiver. You can go receiver at 6 or trade down and take a receiver and then still take one on day 3 or late on day 2 that can actually help you still. But if you're looking at day 2 for a quarterback, you would have to look at someone like Spencer Rattler, maybe, where he's not going to be drafted super high, but he's still got the physical skill set that can help him become a legitimate franchise quarterback. Again, it's a long shot there, but it's one that can happen. And Michael Penix Jr., I mean, if his medicals were good, Michael Penix Jr. is someone that would be talked about more as a first round pick. I think as it stands, we hear that with a lot of some media going, oh yeah, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, first round picks. I'm not going to buy that one. But early second, I could absolutely see it happening. And Michael Penix Jr., again, just medicals hold him back at this point. He's had multiple season-ending knee injuries. He's had shoulder surgery before. You can look at Michael Pratt from Tulane if you want to go a little bit later, but even then there's a reason that he's not looked at as a first round prospect. He doesn't have the arm talent to really separate himself without being extraordinary mentally and accuracy wise.
Brandon, when you look at the quarterbacks, again, we have heard rumors that the Giants would consider trading up. And the guy that, often gets linked to them is Drake May. Is Drake May really worth trading up for, in your opinion, to get up to, say, 3 or 4?
I absolutely would. If I were in that front office, absolutely. I think that Drake May is the best quarterback in the draft this year. So if you can take him at any pick, you go ahead and get that, even if it does mean trading up. Of course, you don't want to get fleeced. You'd only be moving up a few spots. Let's say the top 2 picks are Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels or whoever it may be. But you don't want to trade up too much, because even though he may be viewed as the best quarterback in the draft by people like myself and maybe even in the New York Giants front office, you can't sell the farm, because, if you trade up a ton of assets to go draft Drake May, then you're not going to have those assets to build the team around the Drake May, because this team isn't just a quarterback away from playoffs or the Super Bowl. So you can't trade up too much, but if it's a first, another pick, maybe late on day 2, and a first for next year to move up just a few spots, I would do it. I think Drake May has the biggest potential to be a franchise quarterback.
All right, then let's break down his game a little bit. What is it about his game that you like, and what is it about his game that you feel makes him an ideal fit for what the Giants want to do on offense?
I think he presents all the physical tools that you look for in a franchise quarterback. I feel like a lot in recent years, we've looked at guys where you've got to have a big arm if you're going to be one of the top drafted quarterbacks. You've got to be able to create and improvise there. And that's what separates Drake May from Caleb Williams for me, is that Drake May can keep an offense going on schedule more consistently, whereas Caleb Williams, he thrives on the chaos. And we've seen guys like that work out before. I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes. It's what he did at Texas Tech, was just he thrived on chaos. Josh Allen thrived on chaos, but being able to keep an offense in rhythm and on schedule is more important to me, at least. And so for Drake May, he does need to work on some things. He tries to throw fastballs 100% of the time. Maybe get a little change up in your game there, Drake. But for the most part, I think that he's shown in clutch moments he can come up. He's shown that he's willing to make plays with his legs. If I'm not mistaken, he led North Carolina in rushing yards in 2022. And it wasn't that he was trying to run a ton. It was kind of what was there for him. He's shown flashes that you watch him and you go, all right, he's got that gunslinger mentality that you're going to watch and go, okay, that's a little Brett Favre-ish, but he also does give you the negatives that Brett Favre will give you of turning the ball over a little bit. And I think where Drake May really needs to grow is when defenses show you something pre-snap and switch up after the snap. He's tend to struggle a little bit there, as many young quarterbacks do. But I think that for Drake May, that's what you're getting. You're getting someone who has all the tools and just needs some refinement. Because with a guy like a gunslinger, which you're going to get that from Drake May, Caleb Williams is going to make risky passes. All of the top quarterbacks do it now because it's what the cool kids do when they're growing up. And it's just what you see now. So I think you have to kind of just trade that off. If you're looking for someone who you know isn't going to turn the ball over, then you're probably not getting someone that we look at as he's going to be a franchise quarterback.
Keeping with Drake May for a moment. Now, I know every quarterback develops at his own pace. If the Giants were to take him, if you had to take a guess, you mentioned some of the things he needs to work at, some of the things he needs to get better at. Some of those things, like post-snap recognition, really, you don't get better at that until you're doing it live. So that being said, if you had to take a guess, at what point would you say maybe Drake May might be ready to step in? Or is it just a matter of, as long as the Giants are winning, Daniel Jones is going to be in the saddle, assuming he's healthy?
I would assume that as long as they're winning games, there's no reason to get rid of Daniel Jones at that point during the season. But if things go downhill and you go, all right, well, it's time to start the clock on Drake May's development, then I think at that point, if you look at the mid-season mark, if you're below 500 and it's not looking good, then you consider that. But also, I do think part of it comes to if your offensive line is like if Daniel Jones is playing poorly because the offensive line is getting him killed, do you want to throw a rookie in there? Because we've seen so frequently where these rookie quarterbacks, they get hit a ton and they get a bit shell shocked and things get thrown off. And as far as their development, it gets stunted. So I think that a lot of it depends on if the offensive line's playing at least average and you're just not winning games, then I think you take a look at Drake May and see if he can go out there, develop, and win you some games while he kind of develops on the go and a little bit of a trial by fire there.
All right, now coming up, we're going to talk outside of quarterback because we've been spending the whole time talking quarterbacks. There's other positions, other needs that the Giants have. We're going to address those right after this. Hey, Giant fans, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Hey, Giant fans, the Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, joined by Brandon Olsen. He's the host, by the way, of Locked On Gators, one of our college hosts who knows if the Giants take a Florida Gator, he'll be back on the show with us, breaking that down. And coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast, we're going straight through the weekend, wall-to-wall draft coverage. On tomorrow's show, I'm going to break down the top 30 visits and what they potentially means. We're going to try and read the tea leaves, see maybe what the Giants may or may not do. Since after a couple of drafts, Joe Schoen has shown a tendency to pull some of his top draft picks from the top 30 visits. So we're going to break all that down, and it should be fun as we get you ready for night one of the NFL draft. So make sure you're here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Brandon, besides quarterback, obviously the Giants have other needs. They've got receiver, they've got cornerback, interior defensive line, safety. You can probably make a case for another offensive tackle. Basically, from wall to wall, they've got needs. So, therefore, if the Giants go quarterback at 6 or early in the first round, where do you see the next maybe best value for them in terms of position, and which player do you think is a good fit for them at that?
I think you would look at probably receiver, because if you take a quarterback at 6, then you're looking all the way at 47 as your next pick. So receiver's probably going to start really coming off there, because receiver at the top, great. When you look at the top, even 6 or 7, you're looking at a lot of talented receivers there, and then they kind of start to fall off a little bit, which is understandable. And you're looking more at that point of this guy fits a specific role. And so you can look there, where if you want to take a Florida guy, it'd be Ricky Pearsall, but I'm not too sold on him working as a New York Giant, just because I feel like they would be kind of redundant at that point a little bit. But you could look at a Keon Coleman, who's just a big go up and get it type guy that is not Kenny Galladay, that is actually, I think, good at football. And so you could look at receivers like that. Troy Franklin, a great vertical threat out of Oregon. There's receiver class right now is kind of just, there's a ton of people who can go really from that late first all the way through the early third. It's really just your flavor of the month, I guess, at that point. So it could be a Xavier Legette from South Carolina. And there's just so much ability there. Like, I would love if you can get Keon Coleman. I know that he ran a poor 40 time. I don't care about your 40 time if your GPS time on the field looks good. And it does for Keon Coleman. We've seen him outrun defenders routinely, and not just Georgia Tech in the ACC. We saw him outrun LSU DBs. We've seen him do it consistently at this point in his career. And even at Michigan State prior to Florida State, he was doing it consistently with poor quarterback play. He was making plays there. So if you're looking at a Keon Coleman and he's there at 47, I take him without hesitation.
Now, when you look at the cornerback class, I think it's more heavily slanted towards slot. So if you're the Giants, do you maybe wait to round 3 or maybe even day 4? And do you think that they can come up with a solid prospect that maybe can be that cornerback too in that range?
Yeah, there's a lot of players there that, like, if you're going in the second round, I think TJ Tampa is the pick. I mean, at Iowa State, he was forced to play a ton of cover 3, and I mean, we can expect that the New York Giants will shift more towards cover 3 this year. You could look at Kamari Lassiter, Max Melton, Andrew Phillips, Renardo Green, Kalen Carson. There's a lot of players who can fit that kind of role that you look for. There's Jarvis Brownlee Jr. It's just about finding a guy that you think can step in early and probably play a bit of inside out, because now with all the motion that you see in the NFL and even college football, you're forced to move around the formation a lot. I think one of the things that you see with the Senior Bowl, where corners have been drafted out of the Senior Bowl higher, is because they get put in those one-on-one situations. So you can take their college film and see them play cover 3 and see them play a lot of zone coverage that you see in college naturally. And then when you put them in the Senior Bowl, you put them in these one-on-one, man-to-man defenses and these one-on-one drills, and you get to see them operate there. So guys like Shaw Smith-Wade out of Washington State, he had a pretty strong Senior Bowl. We saw him play a lot of zone coverage at Washington State. So you can look there. DJ James out of Auburn played a very modern defense at Auburn that was very cover 3, very quarters heavy. So it's automatically a decent fit for what the New York Giants are probably going to do in 2024. So DJ James is probably a guy that you can get on day 3, and he's never going to be, or at least I don't think he's ever going to be, an absolute shutdown corner. But if you have a guy that you can get with a day 3 pick and he can contribute at all as a rookie and beyond, then you take that 10 times out of 10.
Brandon, when I look at the Giants draft needs, I can't help but say to myself, they need a little bit more on defense than they do on offense. And I know that, that there's going to be people out there who disagree with me. They're going to say offensive line. They're going to say, obviously, quarterback, wide receiver 1. We know that. But to me, again, I look at interior defensive line. I look at cornerback, safety, maybe even another edge rusher. Do you agree with that? Or do you think this draft, and there's only 6 picks, there may be more coming, there might be less, but if you had to guess the distribution of the draft picks, which side of the ball do you think it leans towards more?
I think that we would see a relatively even split, but maybe like 4 offense, 2 defense, 4 defense, 2 offense. But I think that first pick kind of, we at least expect it to be offense for the most part, whether you're saying, oh, quarterback or receiver, we expect that to be offense. I think we can look at least another pick or 2 going to receiver, especially if 6 is quarterback. Then I think that you can look at a couple picks going receiver there. A lot of it's going to come down to how the board falls. I think on day 3, you could see a couple of defensive players go, specifically guys who can contribute on special teams, whether it's as a returner on field goal block, whether it's as a gunner. But I think it goes relatively evenly, but I think that we will see probably 4 offense, 2 defense at this point. Not that they're great on either side. It's just, I think that where the cards may fall, that's just how things are going to happen.
Brandon, what's the one need associated with the Giants that you don't think is getting enough attention, not being discussed enough?
I mean, for me, it's going to be safety. I will say this. I'm completely biased. When I played football, I played DB, I played safety. I look at what happened with, I mean, letting a guy like Xavier McKinney walk. I thought that he was very good, especially for his youth and his experience. I thought that he was a very good safety. So I think that you can look in this draft where also the safety class, I feel like it gets bashed a lot, and I disagree. I don't think that there's really a superstar safety, but I do think that there's plenty of value in this draft, especially even on day 3. You can add someone who can just contribute in their role, whether you're looking at like Tyler Owens out of Texas Tech is someone that at the combine, he had a couple of, let's say, funny answers that people weren't too thrilled about with the flat earth and everything. But there's plenty of players in this draft at safety that can contribute. And I think that you have to use a pick to at least get someone in there that can sit there, play over the top, or play that hook zone that we're going to see the Giants play this year.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the smoke screens that have been thrown out there by teams, and we're going to see if we can't deduct which ones are real and which one are fake. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. Lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the monopoly that you love, but it's on your phone, available anytime, and comes with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. And there's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and even charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, with Brandon Olsen. You Gator fans know him as the host of Locked On Gators. He's also a Giants analyst, contributes over, I should say, a Giants Country, part of the Fan Nation Network, the site that I run. And he does a really good job. He's been cranking out some great stuff over there. Please come and check us out at si.com/NFL/Giants. And Brandon, there's been a lot of smoke screens thrown up, not just by Joe Shane, but just around the league. Let's try and cut through some of the smoke if we can here. And I think we've got to start with the New England Patriots. Now, was one report, I think, by Tom Curran that it's going to take an unprecedented package for them to move out of the 3rd spot that could consist of as many as 3 first-round picks, which I think, no team is going to pay. There's also been talk about Minnesota moving up. There's been talk about the Giants moving up, Giants moving back. Which of these smoke screens are you buying and which ones aren't you buying?
I'm absolutely buying the one with the Minnesota Vikings wanting to trade up for a quarterback. I don't think that that's a huge secret with Kevin O'Connell there. Justin Jefferson is openly saying, hey, I'm not signing a big contract extension. I'm not signing a long-term deal until you tell me what the long-term plan is at quarterback. And so I think they understand, if we trade up, we might get fleeced a little bit, but we're going to get a guy that we think can be our franchise quarterback, as well as we lock in Justin Jefferson long-term there. So I think trading up for a quarterback is something that the Minnesota Vikings do want to do. I think that's why they made that trade with the Houston Texans, if I'm not mistaken, a little while back, where now they have those extra picks and they get to actually move up, and they have the ammo, we'll say, to take that jump from 11 and give up, I think it's 23, to get into that top 5 if it's possible and take their guy. But it also depends at that point if their top 3 quarterbacks are Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, and those are the first 3 picks. At that point, do they trade up and take someone that they're not as comfortable with? So it depends a lot with Kevin O'Connell. I don't think he'd have an issue with JJ McCarthy. I think that might actually be his preference at this point. The Patriots, I don't think you're going to get 3 first-round picks unless it's the Vikings giving you their one this year or both their ones this year and a one next year. But even then, you're again trading a lot and you're not going to have as much to build around that young quarterback.
What about giant smokescreens? Now, Joe Shane, when he spoke to the media last week, he said he would be comfortable going into the season with just, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito. Joe Shane also said, that there are a lot of needs, which I think a lot of us can agree with. Which of those smokescreens are you buying, and which aren't you buying?
I think that they would be comfortable going into this year with Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito. I wouldn't be comfortable with it, but I think that they might be. They were comfortable enough to give Daniel Jones a big contract. So you have to figure that they don't have too bad buyer's remorse there. But also, if you trade back into the early teens, then you can still accumulate more picks later in the draft to fill out your roster, fill out your needs there. You could still take a guy like Spencer Rattler, and he can be your long-term temporary answer, I guess we could say, while you evaluate what the season looks like now, what you end up with draft-wise next year, and you can kind of just load up your roster because we know that the NFL draft is very much random because no matter what you do, no matter how much work you do, injuries happen, guys get paid and they get less motivated, and just guys get their confidence shocked and can never get it back. So you're going to miss a lot in the draft, but if you have more picks, that just gives you more opportunities to maybe land a player that you think can contribute long term.
I want to ask you about Spencer Rattler because he's a guy whose name is starting to get linked a little bit more, as a potential round 3 pick for the Giants. Tell us, you've done this film on Rattler's game. What does he bring to the table? And if you were to compare him to maybe Drake May, where are the advantages and the disadvantages in his game versus Drake May's?
I think one of the big differences is that we saw Spencer Rattler as a true freshman playing at Oklahoma. We saw him very early playing at Oklahoma, and then he went to South Carolina. Things got a little messy. The offensive line there was terrible. He had one of the worst offensive lines in college football this year. And I think that he does have a lot more room to grow compared to Drake May, which I think that's the main concern with Spencer Rattler, that he still has room to grow, even though he's been a 4-year player at this point in college. He's going to be 24 years old by the time that he's a rookie, or he's 24 presently. So he's going to be 24, turning 25 after his rookie season. But he has gotten a lot better. I think his first year at South Carolina was ugly. This year wasn't great with the supporting cast around him. He lost a lot of talent as well due to injury and the transfer portal. But I feel like he took that next step that we've been kind of waiting for him. It took him a while to get there, but I think he took that next step as a leader and as an actual passer. His accuracy's improved. His arm talent for me is good enough to be your franchise guy. I think he's going to make most throws that you can ask him for. I mean, I saw him against Florida this year as he's just getting lit up right in front of him. He just heaves the ball, and it was a beautiful arcing ball right to Xavier Legette. And I think that Spencer Rattler presents the physical tools that you're going to fall in love with. When he was younger, there were some, let's say, maturity issues with him in the locker room, and that's something that you never really want from your quarterback. But he's improved over the past year or two, and I think that he does give you the physical skill set that you look for and you say, hey, look, it might take a while, but if we can mold him, if we can get him right and build a team around him, then we might actually have our guy without needing to spend an early draft pick on him.
One guy we haven't talked about at quarterback, and his name has come up maybe as a smokescreen, I don't know, J.J. McCarthy. There seems to be a segment of people who think J.J. McCarthy is a top 4 quarterback. There are some that feel that he is not. Where do you stand on that?
I think that he's a top 4 quarterback, but I think he's number 4. I'm not as sold on him. I mean, one thing that I know a lot of people kind of bash him for, and I don't. I think it's a silly argument, but they were like, oh, well, Michigan went undefeated with him barely throwing the ball in some games. They didn't throw the ball in the entire second half against Penn State. They were winning those games. So I understand why you go, oh, well, if you have your franchise quarterback, or if you have a guy that's really that good, you still want to throw the ball with him. But he did his job. He kept the offense moving on schedule. And that's a huge thing that I do think gets overlooked now as we've gone towards you need to be able to play hero ball, which we have seen him do on occasion. It's just not something that he's needed to do. I think for me, that's maybe the biggest question I have is he's won games in high school, he won games in college. He had elite teams around him in high school and elite teams around him. I mean, he played at IMG in high school, which if you don't know IMG, it's where all the future NFL players end up going to play high school, and it's basically early college. And then he played for Michigan, that just had absolute units every single year. And so it's easy to win games there. I think the biggest thing is that he's never really had to put the team on his back. So the big question there is, can he do it? He played an offense that was relatively easy for him to hand the ball off. He got to make a bunch of quick throws underneath. But in an ideal world, he can keep your offense on schedule. We've seen him in a couple of panicky moments, and he's taken shots and delivered the throws, and he's developed year after year. He still has room to grow. Yeah, but we're not talking about him as the first overall pick. We're talking about him as, can you get him in that 4 to 8 range, 4 to 9 range, and have him be your franchise guy? And I think that while he's not the sexy quarterback pick, he's still someone that can be a franchise quarterback.
All right, now final question for you, Brandon. This is your chance. You're the GM of the Giants. You're on the clock. What are you doing in the first round?
I am taking probably the best receiver available at that point, or trading down if I'm not comfortable with that. If Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze are all gone, I'm trading down, which obviously we do not anticipate that being the issue at all. But I do think the quarterbacks will be gone that are going to be valued at 6. And I refuse to reach for a quarterback. I know that right now it's all the rage in media that there's going to be 6 quarterbacks in the first round. One won't be by me if it's not the top 3 or 4 guys available. So I'm either taking the top receiver or trading down at that point.
So you're not trading up to get a Drake May then?
Nope. I wouldn't do it just because I don't think that you can build a team around him if you do it. Even again, talent wise, absolutely. But I think that you would probably lose a bit of your draft capital to build the team around him. And I think that this team's got a decent way to go.
All right. So if all 3 of those receivers, those top 3 are on the board, which one do you like for the Giants and why?
I would probably take. I mean, it does depend if you're thinking long term who your quarterback's going to be. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the safest bet. He was one of the most doubled receivers in college football last year, and he still had one of the highest success rates. He's proven as a route runner, he's not going to give you, I think, the explosive plays that we like and that we see on TikTok and Instagram Reels. But I think that he gives you consistency, and he gives the New York Giants finally a wide receiver 1 that they've been looking for since they traded Odell.
Interestingly, I have been beating the drum all off season for a wide receiver 1. I say that is going to help whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Jones, Locke, whoever. I've been beating the drum for Rome Odunze. I think he's the safest pick out of the 3. I don't know if he's going to fall, though, down to the Giants. Maybe Arizona grabs him. I could see the Chargers maybe grabbing him. But Odunze would be my pick.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Harbaugh has experience playing him. He just played him a couple months ago. I think that he would know, hey, we won that game handedly, but Rome Odunze still gave us a bit of an issue in that one.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun. I can't wait. We're finally going to get some answers. Depending on when people are watching this, it'll be either tomorrow or basically, like I said, less than 48 hours. We will have answers for round 1. Giant fans, make sure you keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. I'll have videos for you, shorts. Obviously, I'll be doing shows, reaction shows. We'll break stuff down. Giants Country, make sure you check that out. We'll be posting content all weekend long, right through, to the end of the draft and thereafter when we do the undrafted free agents. So please check us all out. We appreciate you, Brandon. I appreciate you. And of course, next week, we will have the college hosts who represents the schools from the players that the Giants pick on the draft. So that is coming up. Maybe we'll see Brandon again. which would be cool. He's always down to come on the program. Brandon's a Giant fan, for those of you who don't know. He does a great job. So anyway, Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Don't forget, tomorrow on the show, I'm going to take a look at the top 30 visits, and I'm going to try and read the tea leaves, what it means and what it doesn't mean. So make sure you tune in for that. For Brandon Olsen, I'm Patricia Trainer. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day, or you just spent a few minutes with us. We will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.